Some mornings arrive softly. They don't come with fireworks or fanfare. Instead, they come quietly, like a whisper after a long silence, like the sound of birds waking up the world after a long night. Easter morning is a lot like that. It begins in the stillness of a garden. The air is thick with grief. The sky hasn't started to lighten, hope is buried, and no one knows what to expect next. John tells us in the 20th chapter of his gospel that early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. Mary runs to tell Peter and John, and they race to the tomb. They see the grave clothes, they notice Jesus' body is gone, and then they go home, trying to make sense of it all. But Mary stays. She doesn't go looking for answers or trying to figure things out. She just stands there and weeps. Her pain anchors her in place. And then Jesus arrives. At first, she doesn't recognize him. She thinks he's the gardener. But then Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned toward him in that moment and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. That's John chapter 20, verse 16. Jesus speaks just one word to her, and it's her name. And that's all it takes. She doesn't get a speech or a sign. She gets something better: recognition, dignity, reassurance. She's known, loved, seen. That's how the resurrection of Jesus shows up for us also, personally, gently, through our doubts and disillusionments and tears. Isaiah tells us that Jesus calls us by name also. Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount that he knows each of us intimately, even to the point of knowing the number of the hairs that are on our heads. Years ago, when I was serving as a pastor in New York City, I got to know the artist Makoto Fujimura, who was a member of the church I served. At the time, Mako was working on a special commission, a hand-painted, illuminated version of the four Gospels to mark the 40th anniversary of the King James Bible. He invited me to visit his studio while the work was still in progress. When I walked in, what struck me first wasn't the artwork. It was the quiet space in which it was being created. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It felt like a reverent and sacred kind of stillness, like a sanctuary. Crushed minerals, like lapis lazuli, gold, and silver, were laid out in small containers. Handmade Japanese paper was stretched carefully across tables and the floor. Some pages already had layers of glowing color. Others were blank and waiting. Mako's creative space didn't feel like a place of production. Nothing in the room was rushed. Everything had been selected and curated with care. The process was underway, gradual and living. It reminded me that resurrection often works the same way. We sometimes imagine that Easter is some kind of instant fix, a fast turnaround. But maybe it's more like what Mako was doing in that studio. A patient layering of grace over sorrow, of beauty over what's been broken, like shards of gold sprinkled over an empty canvas. When Jesus rose from the dead, he didn't get rid of his scars. He kept them, and he showed them to his disciples. It says in the Gospels that Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And after this, he showed them his hands and his side. That's John chapter 20. The wounds of Jesus didn't disappear. He still carries the scars in glory, but their meaning was transformed. They weren't signs of failure. They were signs of weathered, sacrificial, self-donating, life-giving love. Anglican Bishop N.T. Wright once said that the message of Easter is that God's new world has been unveiled in Jesus Christ and that you are now invited to belong to it. The resurrection means that this present world matters. What you do with your body matters. What you do with your relationships, your art, your work, your sorrow, it all matters. Easter isn't about escaping the world. It's about God redeeming it from the inside out. God isn't waiting for us to move past our grief before he begins to heal it. He meets us in our grief and shares with us in it. Most mornings I'm outside early walking the dog. Especially after a long winter when everything still feels gray and cold, I start to hear something in the air. It's the sound of birds singing back and forth to each other. It starts with just one or two, and then more. Eventually, there's a scattered chorus that arises against a once sleepy sky, like a lovely alarm clock that awakens all creation. Even when the sun hasn't come up, the singing starts anyway. It's not loud or boisterous, but it's steady and it's filled with anticipation. It's certain and it's sure. It's a new mercy that meets our dog Lulu and me every morning. A fresh reminder at the start of the day that God's mercies are new every single morning, and that great is his faithfulness. As God's creation, I can't help but believe that the birds know something that the rest of us forget. That even before the sun rises, even before the day ahead reveals itself, God is awake, God is at work, and God is preparing to shower the world with his presence and care. Easter Sunday is like the voice of God calling your name in the dark. A quiet song rising through the silence of Saturday, the day between the cross and the crown, between rupture and redemption, between death and life, between sorrow and singing. Easter Sunday is God telling you straight up that he is going to fill your empty spaces. That's why Mary's moment at the tomb matters to all of us. Because before theology or tradition or pastel dresses and shirts, there's Jesus meeting us in our dark places with the light of his resurrected love and his unveiled hope. If Jesus is alive, then everything really does change for us. It means our worst failure isn't final, our hardest day or season doesn't define us, and even death doesn't get the last word. And this resurrection, it wasn't just for Mary and the first disciples, it's also for us. Jesus is still calling names out, still showing his weathered scars, still speaking peace into places where fear has flourished for way too long, still entering locked rooms like our hearts, our memories, our doubts, and saying, I'm here, and behold, I am making all things new. So what does Easter mean for us today? It means that if your faith feels small, Jesus isn't disappointed in you. He's actually quite pleased with a faith that is the size of a tiny little mustard seed, which at the time was the smallest known seed around. He's patient. He's kind. He doesn't break bruised reeds or snuff out dimly burning wicks. Instead, Jesus draws near to them, handles them gently, and renews and restores them to strength. If your grief feels too heavy to carry, he won't rush you through it. He walks with you in it. Sorrow and grief don't scare him. They move him. They warm his heart toward the sufferer. If your hope feels distant or quiet, Jesus knows how to breathe life into it again. As the prophet Jeremiah once wrote to a grieving people in exile, the Lord has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. How can that be true? Because he is our hope and he is our future. In Ephesians 2, verse 10, Paul reminds us that we are God's workmanship, his poema, his artwork in process. Poema is the Greek word where we get our word poetry. Think about that. You right now are God's poem in process. Not a mass-produced product, not a rushed draft, but a carefully crafted work of beauty, formed through grace, shaped in the crucible of love. Like birds that sing before sunrise after a cold, dark night. Like an artist who layers color from crushed minerals, slowly, deliberately, to produce a masterpiece. Easter tells us that God, the master artist, is doing the same with our lives, especially with the parts that feel crushed. But the crushing is momentary. The truth and beauty that will come from it are eternal. Resurrection doesn't ignore what's broken. It restores it. It gives us courage to believe in joy again, even when the ache of Good Friday still lingers. It helps us wait through the quiet of Silent Saturday, the awkward in-between time. And it anchors us in the hope of Sunday, when healing comes, when death loses its grip, and when love, once and for all, gets the final word. The angel said to Mary, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen." It's Luke 24. So today, wherever you are, whether you're filled with faith, hope, and love, or barely holding on, Easter is the day for you. If you feel like Mary outside the tomb or like Thomas, still waiting to see for yourself, Easter is still for you because Jesus is alive. The tomb is empty, and the birds will never stop singing. If any of this was helpful for you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss future teachings. Also, please share it with friends or family that you think could benefit from it. Thanks for joining me here, and I look forward to seeing you next time.